Hello, you find me wild-eyed, tousle-haired and unshaven in the garden because I wanted to sit in the garden and get away from my laptop screen and writing my notes. I've actually written notes again because this is a video about one of those subjects that gives historians a headache whenever people mention it, because this is a video about the Knights Templar. I'm going to take my boots off and just feel grass. Oh, that's nice. Yes, do it more. The Knights Templar are fascinating. I really enjoy the Knights Templar. I really enjoy reading about them. I enjoy researching them. Every time I look up the Knights Templar, just as a historical subject, I find more and more to be fascinated about. But the Knights Templar are also a subject that is fraught with controversy, because it is also a subject that is fraught with nonsense. And the wooey stuff we are going to talk about, but not in this video. I'm going to do a part 2 video on the Knights Templar, where I talk about the sort of conspiracy aspect of them. I talk about the wooey stuff, as the last podcast on the left would probably call it. Because the Knights Templar are a genuine, real, fascinating part of medieval history, but they're also a source for a lot of conspiracy, a lot of misinformation, and we're going to try and untangle some of that. So this video is just going to be a little bit of a look at the history of them. Why were they formed? What did they do? Who were they really? And how did they end up having most of their leadership burned at the stake? So before we do a deep dive into that, we're going to talk about our sponsor for this video, which is another organisation that is international and helps to break down borders. That's a weird way of introducing NordVPN, isn't it? I'm sure you've heard of NordVPN. They offer next-gen antivirus protection. They have the VPN that we're also fond of. But now they also have basically an all-in-one cybersecurity app service available. So you can upgrade your online security with NordVPN by going to nordvpn.com/Welsh Viking. You get an exclusive deal plus 4 months extra on your subscription to NordVPN. And when they say an all-in-one app, what they mean is basically they do anti-phishing, anti-malware, anti-dodgy website screening before this stuff is active on your computer. And I use NordVPN. It's on my laptop, it's on my phone. It's actually really cool. Now, the VPN offering isn't going anywhere. That's still one of the key things. I use the VPN, as you guys know. I'm lucky enough to be able to travel a little bit, and NordVPN allows me to access my home subscription services from abroad, so I can basically tell my laptop that it's in the UK when I'm actually over in Canada, which is really cool. But NordVPN also has all of this amazing next-gen antivirus software, which gives peace of mind because it sort of detects all of these malwares and phishing scams before they attack you in some cases, which is really clever, and I don't really understand how it works, but they do, and that's the important thing. So if you want to upgrade your online security and have all of this anti-malware and anti-phishing scam and anti-spam software at your fingertips, you can go to nordvpn.com/Welsh Viking, and you'll get that deal where you get an extra 4 months and an exclusive offer from NordVPN, which is jolly good of them, because it's awfully nice to feel secure in your online wheelings and dealings and surfings. And that's basically what they want to do, is make the internet free and open to all, as it should be. We all hate the fact that the internet has borders. I certainly do. I think it's very silly, but you need to have robust antivirus and anti-scamming and anti-malware software, and that's where NordVPN comes in. So upgrade your online security with nordvpn.com/Welsh Viking, get that exclusive deal and that extra 4 months. Go and check them out. Thank you very much, NordVPN, for once again sponsoring one of my videos. Alright, let's crack on. So, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, better known as the Knights Templar, are founded in the 12th century, in the early 12th century. Now, they're founded at a time known as the 12th century Renaissance, and it's not like the sort of 15th, 16th, 17th century Renaissance later on in Europe. This is a religious Renaissance, kind of kick-started by the Crusades themselves. In the First Crusade in the 1090s, Christian forces go from Western Europe to Jerusalem, and they conquer it in 1099. And this is huge, right? This is a massive upheaval in Western European Christian thinking, because the holy city is in Christian hands. And that is a huge thing. It's a massive inspiration. People are going there in their thousands, in their tens of thousands. People are going to these holy places that are written about in the Bible. They're seeing places in the Bible that they've been preached to about, that they have read about, some of them that they've been told about all of their lives. And they're finally going there and they're seeing these places. They're going to the places where Christ was born, where Christ was crucified, where all of these things happened in the Bible. But they're not going unopposed. There are still Egyptian forces around in what is called the Holy Land. There are still people attacking Christian pilgrims, and that is where military orders start to come in. So the first one, kind of the famous one, is the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights of St. John. They're formed in 1113. They're kind of initially started in 1099 when Jerusalem is captured. But by 1113 they're an actual order, and in the 1120s and 30s they start to be militarised. Now, one of the people that goes to Jerusalem around 1113-14 is a chap called Hugues de Payens, or Hugues de Payens, or Ugo de Paganis. This is medieval France, so there's like 15 different ways of writing somebody's name and the town that they come from, so by and large in English he is Hugues de Payens, but the village he may have come from seems to actually be called Payens. Not Pain, Pain. And Hugues of Pain, not Pain, Pain, seems to go to Jerusalem around 1113-14 when the Knights Hospitaller are being founded. And the legend is that there's a massacre of pilgrims on the road at Easter time, and that inspires him to set up his own military order to help protect the pilgrims on the road. I haven't really seen much solid evidence that that's a real thing. My kind of headcanon is he goes over there, he sees the Knights Hospitaller, he fancies a bit of that. Maybe he's got things that he needs to be penitent for, maybe he wanted to be a monk anyway, he had hankerings of monasticism, and he says, we're going to set up our own monastic order with blackjack and horses. And he decides that he's going to set up the Knights Templar. And his headquarters is going to be the Temple on the Mount, Temple of Solomon, as it were. And so in the 1110s, Hugues de Payens and his chums set up their own order. They set up a military order, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. And I'm going to adjust my exposure settings just ever so slightly. Yes, there we go. Slightly better. Anyway, Hugues de Payens and his chums set up the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, better known to us now as the Knights Templar. And somewhere around sort of 1118, 1920 area, the nephew of one of the founder members, a man called Bernard de Clairvaux, now Saint Bernard de Clairvaux, who is a very well-known, well-respected theologian, monk, sets up the Cistercian order of monks, very famous order of monks. In France, he has the ear of bishops and archbishops and even the king and the pope, gives his support to them. He gives his support to the new order. In 1120, there is a council, the Council of Nablus, which is a city in Palestine. Nablus is still there, where King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, who is the Latin king of Jerusalem, they call the Christian Western European kings the Latins, they call them Latins, these Crusader people who've turned up, they're known as the Latins. He has this council that discusses all sorts of things, including a mouse infestation in Jerusalem, and in amongst the mices and all of the other stuff, Baldwin II supposedly gives his blessing to the Knights Templar to exist. So Hugues de Payens is said to have attended this council. He is said to have been given the temple, access to the temple on the mount, in 1120 at the Council of Nablus. That's kind of according to some, and there's a little bit of supposition, and there's a little bit of sort of filling in the gaps. Do know that after that, in 1129, at the Council of Troyes, which Bernard de Clairvaux, not Troyes, Troyes, which Bernard de Clairvaux takes part in, and there's a papal emissary there. They discuss various things, quarrels between the King of France and the Bishop of Paris and all that sort of thing. At the Council of Troyes, in 1129, the Poor Fellow Soldiers are officially recognised as a monastic order. So they are a legit 24-carat, genuine order of monks, which means a couple of things. One, it means that it starts the ball rolling on the Pope, giving them new powers. And two, it means they get to call each other brother. So the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon are now monks, official monks. They get a rule that Bernard de Clairvaux and Hugh de Payen write together, and initially it has 72 rules in it. It's written in Latin, and then it's translated and expanded later on, but it's got 72 rules in it, like vow of poverty is a key one, a vow of chastity, avoiding women as best you can, wearing only white, brown, or black, no multiple colours in your clothes, and full knight members get to wear white cloaks. So if you are a knight and you join this order, you wear a cloak. And this is the interesting thing about the Knights Templar, is a lot of the people who are joining aren't just commoners who want to be monks. They're not, just pilgrims who want to piece the action. They have a lot of noble members, like a lot of noble and royal members and patrons in their history, brief though it is. And that's probably part of the reason it gets so big so fast. So they're formed, they are in proper monastic order, but they've also got knights, and their mission is to protect pilgrims on the road. And as the Bad Gays podcast put it, when they, in their episode about the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, there is some mission creep. So 10 years after, in 1139, there is the Omne Datum Optimum, which is a papal bull that gives the Knights Templar immunity from local laws. They can basically bypass borders, they can travel internationally, and their only authority is the Pope. So nobody, princes, kings, gets to tell them what to do. The Grand Master, the first Grand Master is Hugh de Payen, is in charge of the order, and then above him, clouds, and then the Pope, right? And then clouds, God. So this is really important because this gives them huge carte blanche. They have carte blanche to do lots and lots of stuff, right? And I'm not sure about this, so I need a medieval legal expert to chime in the comments, please. As they're monks, I think that means that they come under ecclesiastical law. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's possibly the case. And ecclesiastical law is interesting because it's church law, and under church law there's no death penalty, which is kind of fun. So even if a medieval priest murders somebody, theoretically he can be tried under ecclesiastical law if he murders the right person, as it were, and cannot have the death penalty levelled against him. So that's fun. Now, the Omne Datum Optimum also means that the Knights Templar don't pay taxes, and a little bit later, in 1150, they start granting letters of credit. Now, we're already getting some of the wooey stuff in here. Some of these are sources for the wooey stuff, like Bernard de Clairvaux's involvement. Oh, how did they get Bernard de Clairvaux involved? How did they get somebody so huge and so big and important? He was, we think, related to one of the founder members, and also, medieval France wasn't that big. It's not that deep. There are only a few people involved at this level in, like, monasticism and forming new monastic orders with links to the Crusader states. Like, there aren't that many people doing it. It's a relatively small community. The letters of credit thing in 1150 is another source of the wooey, because this is where they start to get rich. So they have all of these people joining. They have nobles, they have royals, they have commoners joining the order, and people who join permanently take a vow of poverty. So where do all their assets go? Well, their individual stuff, their wealth, their belongings, their land, very often gets donated to the order, which means that the Knights Templar, like all of the other monastic orders, have a lot of land. The Knights Templar have a shed load of land, because if a noble joins and donates all their land to the order, they get all of that land. They have to farm those fields, they have to pick those grapes, they have to bottle that wine, they have to employ people to do all of that, and that means that they have a lot of money. So they start to be able to issue letters of credit, because as the order spreads around, they have commanderies and they have preceptories. And these are basically their mini HQ buildings in various places. So let's say you are a pilgrim and you want to go to Jerusalem and you've got some money. You take some of that money and you put it in a Templar preceptory in, for example, Marseille, and you say, hello, I would like to go on a pilgrimage, please. Here is my 200 livres of silver. It's a lot of silver. Please, can I have a letter of credit? And the brother Templar, or the Templar behind the counter, says, yes, of course you can, sir. Here you go. Here's your letter of credit. Good luck. God bless. God speed you. And then you toddle down Italy. You get on a boat. You end up in, I don't know, like the Peloponnese, in like Chalkidiki in Greece, and you get off the boat and there's a Templar outpost there, and you go in and you say, hello, I would like some money, please, because I need to pay the rest of my ferry fares to get to Jerusalem. And behind the counter says, of course, I see here that you have 200 livres in an account with us. Well, how much would you like? 20 livres? Of course, I will just scratch this off. It says 180 livres now. Here are your 20 livres of silver from our vault, and here is your letter that says you have 180 left. You get on the ferry, you go to Gaza. There is a Templar commandery there, because at one point the Templars were just given Gaza City, and then you go into the commandery and you say, hello, I would like to take some money out so that I can make a donation to a church in thanks for my safe travels, and so I've got some spends while I'm here. I'd like to take out 50 livres, and he says, of course, your letter of credit, 180, becomes 120, and you know it becomes 130, doesn't it? Sorry, sir, I'm new on the job. 130, and there you go, here's your letter of credit, and here's 50 livres of silver. God bless, enjoy your time in the Holy Land. Don't forget to try the falafel while you're here. Anyway, that's basically what they're doing, but they're doing it to thousands and thousands of people. Some of those people give them the money. These assets are invested like a modern bank would, and that makes them more money. They effectively become an international banking corporation in the 1150s and 60s, which is mind-blowing to think about. This started 30 years beforehand as half a dozen semi-rich French dudes who barely had enough bowls to go around in their order to feed themselves. They are now an international banking corporation with thousands and thousands of people on their staff. They've got admin support, they've got farmers, they've got vintners, they've got sailors, they've got bankers, they've got buildings all over the place, and they've got acres and acres and acres and acres of land in most of Europe. Batty. Now, this is the sort of time where we think they start wearing the famous red cross. Now, initially the rule says you can wear one colour, and it can be white, brown or black, and medieval reenactors will know that that is because those are the colours of undyed sheep's wool, emphasising your poverty. If you are a full knight member, you get to wear a white cloak. According to, I believe, William of Tyre, Pope Eugenius III in 1147 gives the Knights Templar permission to wear a red cloth cross sewn onto their clothing. We have anonymous sources later in the 12th century who say that the Templars are wearing red crosses, and that's about what we've got for the red cross thing. It just says a red cross, and it's kind of become the classic double-pointed Templar cross, right? But as far as I can tell, initially it just says a red cross, and there's likely to have been no uniformity in the size, the shape, or the position of the cross, but you can imagine most people were probably wearing it on the chest, right? If they're wearing a surcoat, if they're wearing a coat over their armour in combat, it's going to be on the chest, probably. Big one over the middle, small one over the heart, who knows? We don't know. We have various depictions showing various things. There's no uniformity, right? Even in the Roman army, there was no uniformity of equipment. Why the hell do you think there would be in the Knights Templar? Come on, get a grip. By 1150, they're wearing the red cross, they're wearing the white, they're wearing the black, they're wearing the brown, they've got the red cross on the uniform, and they have, at their height, sort of end of the 12th, early 13th century, at their height, they've got about 15 to 20,000 members. Now, that's a lot of men, and exclusively men, but it's worth remembering, we reckon now, Malcolm Butler and other people have made calculations that about 10% of them are actual Knights Templar. So the Knights Templar is a misnomer, because most of them weren't. Most of them were members of the Order of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Yeah? Hey. My notes. Hey you sleaze, my bed!
Hey you sleaze, my bed!
So, if 1,500 to 2,000 of these people are Knights Templar, the other 18,500 of them are just members of the order. And below the knights we have the sergeants, and the sergeants are sort of the lesser members of the order. And they also fight as cavalrymen. So the Knights Templar are given, each knight is given 3 horses and a squire. And they're also armed and equipped as knights of the period. So they're wearing full mail, they're wearing like a mail haubergeon, they've got mail chausses, they've got mail on their legs, they've got mail on their feet, they've got mail on their hands, they're wearing a helmet, they've got a coif of mail under the helmet, they've probably got a padded arming jacket as well of some sort, a gambeson if you like. They've got the surcoat, they've got the cloak, they've got the sword, they've got a spear, they've probably got a mace as well, and 3 horses and a squire. Sergeants get 1 horse and are armed and equipped sort of as best they can manage it in many places, but they are an extremely effective fighting force. The Knights Templar and the Order of Poor Fellow Soldiers are very, very effective. At various battles, a few hundred Knights Templar can turn the tide against thousands of enemies. I think there's a battle where 500 Knights Templar turned the tide against 25,000 Egyptians, which is mad. But they have a very fierce reputation. They've got an unstoppable PR machine, and people trust them. Like, they are giving out letters of credit, and those letters of credit are being respected across a continent. That's unheard of. They are being gifted castles, including border castles in the Holy Land. So the borders of the Crusader states, the castles there are being donated to the Templars. And what do the Templars do with those castles? They garrison them with sergeants, they garrison them with men, maybe there's a knight in charge of the castle, and they establish markets. Jimmy, why are you excited that they establish markets? That's ridiculous. No, markets, traditionally in medieval Europe, require royal permission to operate. You have to have a charter granted to you by a king or queen to open a market. They're just doing that. The Knights Templar are just doing that. They can do what they want. They are immune to local laws. They don't pay taxes. They start markets. They give letters of credit. They have a standing army of thousands. They have a navy. It's mostly a trading and sort of passenger fleet, but they have a navy of people. It's wild. And their organisation has got these very specific ranks. We have people like the Grand Master, the Seneschal, the Draper, who is in charge of the clothes, chaplains, who are ordained priests working within the order. And they are a monastic order. Like, they have preceptories and commanderies that are the equivalent of their monasteries. They're not cloistered, they're not hidden away in a silent order where all they do is read and transcribe and farm. They're out there fighting and killing and dying on battlefields. And that is crazy times. That's absolute crazy times. Now, they do come into conflict with other orders like the Hospitallers and the Teutonic Order that's up in northeastern Europe, but they are kind of a huge dominating force, and that starts to become a bit of a problem. Now, they are such a dominating force in Europe, and they have so much money, and they are owed so much money by so many people that eventually they kind of have to start asking for it back. And amongst the people who owe them money are the noble and royal families of Europe. And by the end of the 13th century, things aren't going great in the Holy Land. Jerusalem is lost, and in 1291, Acre is lost, and Acre is one of the last bastions of the Crusader states on the mainland. And when Acre is lost, the Templars move to Cyprus, which they own. Like, the Templars just own Cyprus at one point in their history, which is incredible to think. So they move to Limassol on Cyprus, and that becomes the headquarters of the Knights Templar for a little bit here. Now, Cyprus is also at one point in this period the headquarters of the Knights Hospitaller, and then they trundle over to Malta and do all kinds of interesting Maltese things, and like eating Maltesers and filming Popeye. The Templars make various attempts to get back onto the mainland. They try to recapture the Holy Land. This is their purpose. This is their job. But because they have already failed, because the Holy Land has been lost despite a Templar presence, despite the vast wealth and power of the Order of the poor fellow soldiers, that's really, really damaging reputationally. Their reputation is kind of being shredded at this point, right? Well, you're here to protect pilgrims. There aren't any pilgrims because you've lost the bloody Holy Land. Like, Jerusalem has fallen. And so they try all kinds of things. At one point, the French are writing letters and sending gifts to the Mongols. When the Mongols invade Eastern Europe, a lot of people are afraid, but a lot of people are quite optimistic that they might fight with them against Muslim forces as a kind of common enemy, like an enemy of my enemy is my friend situation. Equally, there are Crusader princes and counts who are giving Muslim forces military access through their territory to go and fight the Mongols. And it's all caught up in this weird Prester John situation. There's a medieval legend in France that an Eastern king called Prester John will come and help the Christians retake the Holy Land. And some people think, oh, well, there are Nestorian Christians in the Mongol courts, so maybe the Ilkhans are actually Prester John and his mates. But it never comes to anything. Around 1300 it starts to fizzle, and there's no kind of Mongolian Christian alliance that retakes the Holy Land. It doesn't happen. The situation gets worse and worse, and it's not helped by the fact that the papacy in the early 14th century is in Avignon, in France. And the Avignon papacy is a really fascinating thing all on its own. We're not really going to touch on it today. But the Avignon papacy means that the Pope is in France, not in the Papal State. He's surrounded by French territory, which means that the King of France has huge power and leverage against the Pope. In 1307, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, a man called Jacques de Molay, is summoned to Avignon to meet with Pope Clement V. Clement V has heard accusations that there is bad stuff going on in the Knights Templar, that there is heresy, that people are doing things like spitting on the cross, denying Christ, all that kind of stuff. And this is nothing new. These are the classic accusations of heresy. This is the classic, right, somebody, I don't like somebody, he's a heretic. That's how it works. If the King of France doesn't like somebody, he accuses them of heresy. And then, oh, the Pope gets involved and the Inquisition gets involved and there's a scandal. And to get rid of the scandal, the person accused of heresy is burned at the stake, or they start a crusade against them, like the Cathars in southern France. There are all of these people living perfectly happy, relatively quiet lives. Oh, but they're doing Christianity in slightly the wrong way, so they're heretics. We have to get rid of them. Let's start a crusade. It stops all of my noblemen fighting each other. Instead, they're fighting a common enemy in the Cathars. But also Jewish people accused of being witches. And this is Philip IV's playbook. If he doesn't like somebody, he just accuses them of heresy. And it's the same heresies every time. It's spitting on the cross. It's denying Christ. It's sodomy. It's kissing men inappropriately, whatever that means. And in this case, it's worshipping Baphomet. And you might think it's pronounced Baphomet, and you would be wrong, because Baphomet is a mispronunciation of Baphomet, which is a mispronunciation of Muhammad. Because the first evidence we have of Baphomet is in the 12th century, where we are told that the Muslims in the Holy Land offer prayers and praise to Baphomet. It's Muhammad. He is a prophet of God. What's his name? Baphomet. You sure it's not Muhammad? No, pretty sure it's Baphomet. It's just French people hearing things wrong. It happens. And the idea of like the cloven-hooved, goat-faced, horny man on fire comes from like the 1860s. It's not a demon. It's not like devil worship. They're being accused of being Muslims. They're being accused of going rogue and joining the opposition and being secretly Muslims. Woo. That's the thing. It's not that deep, but it's another place where the wooey conspiracy stuff can leak in. And there's obviously zero evidence. There's zero evidence outside of the inquisitorial records where they're like, ha, got him, write it down. Didn't happen. It's not real. They were just doing their best to be Knights Templar, and then all of a sudden the King of France owes them too much money, and he has a perfect excuse to get them, and he gets them. Push it down, suppress it down. Jacques de Molay gets to Avignon, has a chat with Clement. They basically hash it out together and say, yeah, look, there's nothing to this. There's no real evidence of this happening. I can't prove it. No one else can prove it. You seem like a decent dude. You're doing a lot of good. In 1308, the Chinon manuscripts clear the Templars of any wrongdoing. And the Chinon manuscripts, Chinon, Chinon manuscripts, in 1308, absolve them of all wrongdoing. And they still exist. They're in the Vatican archives. They're a real thing that is in the Vatican archives and that is about the Knights Templar. There you go, the Chinon manuscripts. However, the Pope writes to Philip IV of France and says, Philip IV, I could do with a hand in this investigation. You've got more resources than I have. Give me a hand with this. Philip IV, at this point, owes about 800,000 livres to the Knights Templar, because Philip IV keeps going to war against people, and that costs a lot of money, and he's been fighting the English for ages. At one point the Scots are involved, fighting the English as well. So Philip IV owes a crap ton of money. There's like 50 tons worth of silver to the Knights Templar. So when Pope Clement writes to him and says, hey, can you help me investigate the Knights Templar and just double check that there's no evidence of wrongdoing in like any of the French preceptories and commanderies and all that kind of thing, just make sure you haven't heard anything. He says, oh, I'm going to do better than that. And on Friday, October the 13th, 1307, Philip IV of France orders that at daybreak, the leaders of the Templars in France, including Jacques de Molay, are to be arrested. And that's exactly what happens. And this is another place where the wooey-wooey stuff leaks in, because people are like, oh, how did Philip manage to get all of them arrested at the same time? How did he get orders to people quickly enough that it could happen? And I'd like to introduce you to the concept of a horse, because a horse can run faster than a person. And if you put a person on that horse and send him around France, hey, you sleaze my bed. You send several hymns around France. The hymns riding those horses deliver those orders rapid styly to the people who need to get the orders, who are being paid by the King of France to carry out those orders, and then those orders are carried out. So Jacques de Molay and a bunch of other Templars are arrested, and for the next 7 years the Templars are investigated by the Inquisition, and dozens of people are burned at the stake. We always talk about Jacques de Molay. Dozens of people are burned at the stake. Almost certainly all innocent of any kind of heresy or wrongdoing. According to the Chinon manuscripts, that was the Pope's stance. Now, on the 27th of November, the same year, 1307, there is the Pastoralis Praeeminentiae, which is a papal edict, and it says all Templars in Europe are to be arrested, all of their assets are to be stripped. And the crowd goes mild, quite frankly. Some kings and kingdoms and queens go, yeah, it would be nice to strip them of their assets, and then we could have some of them. I owe the Templars quite a lot of money as well, so maybe I'll follow suit. King Denis I of Portugal refuses point blank. He's like, no way. The Templars are a massive reason why Portugal even exists. They have helped us in the Reconquista. They are helping us to defend our borders. I am not persecuting the Knights Templar. In fact, I'm going to shelter them and allow them to continue to exist. And they continue to exist as the Order of Christ. And the Order of Christ still exists now. It's an order of merit that you can get if you do nice things for the Portuguese. But it sort of quickly becomes this chivalric order, this order of merit, rather than like an actual monastic order, sort of like the Order of the Garter, or the Order of the Star, or the Order of the Thistle. And that's kind of the only bit of the Knights, that's the rump of the Knights Templar that survives. And they are done at this point, basically. Like, the assets of the Templars are being stripped, Templars are being arrested left, right and centre, they're being interrogated by the Inquisition, they're being tortured, and a load of them confess, under torture, to heresy. If you ask ex-CIA dude John Kiriakou if torture works, he will say no, absolutely not. It's bad and illegal and it doesn't work. Loads of people are confessing under torture to heresy. And One of them is a chap called Raymond de la Fère, says he spat on the cross, but he did it de bouche et pas de cœur. He did it with his mouth, but not with his heart, which I think is a lovely way of doing it. And he was 21 when he was interrogated. He was interrogated, tortured by the Inquisition at the age of 21. He's just this young dude. He's just this guy who joined the Knights Templar, maybe for routine, maybe for food, maybe because he's just a religious young man. And an awful lot of these confessions are recanted, but it just gets worse and worse and worse. Philip IV keeps putting the pressure on. He keeps demanding that the Templars are what's the word? There's a word, and I've written it down here. Disbanded? Disbanded. There we go. That'll do. And eventually Clement V relents. He disbands the Knights Templar. He says all of the assets are to be given to the Hospitallers, and Philip IV is threatening to invade, so he doesn't really have much choice. But this is a thing that happens surprisingly often in medieval Europe, is somebody will threaten to attack the Pope, or kidnap the Pope, or murder the Pope, and the rest of the crowned heads of Europe are just like, yeah, we'll just see how this works out. Maybe the new Pope will be more sympathetic to us. It's cool, it's fine. You'd imagine they'd all just like rally round the Pope and invade, but no, it's cool. Didn't really like this Pope, I will wait for another Pope. This is really loosely like, I will wait for another. Now, throughout this period, there are Templars who are legally trained, who are legally experienced. Remember, they've got this massive international banking network. They've got bankers, they've got lawyers out the wazoo. I don't know what a wazoo is, but they've got bankers coming out of theirs. And Philip blocks these people. He's like, nope, you are no longer a Knight Templar. The Knights Templar do not exist. You are not allowed to represent yourself legally. That's not allowed. I forbid it. You're in France. My rules go. Not for you. And on March the 18th, 1314, Jacques de Molay and the heads of the Knights Templar are burned at the stake publicly in Paris, facing the Cathedral of Notre Dame. And the legend goes that Jacques de Molay had his hands bound up in front of him as though in prayer, and he supposedly said the following: Dieu sait qui a tort et a péché. Dieu sait qui a tort et a péché. Il va bientôt arriver malheur à ceux qui nous ont condamnés à mort. So God knows who is wrong and who has sinned. Soon a calamity will come to those who have condemned us to death. Within the year, Pope Clement is dead, and Philip IV of France has a stroke during a hunting trip. So, if true, that's incredibly spooky, and also justice. If not true, still a lovely story. But I think that's enough. Without the wooey stuff, without the Da Vinci Code crap, that's fascinating. This is a group of half a dozen French low nobility who set up a monastic order, and over the next 180 years it goes from that to being a huge influential military force in the Crusader states. At one point, when I think Baldwin VI of Jerusalem dies, he gives the keys to the kingdom, like to the treasury in the palace, to the Grand Masters of the Templars and the Hospitallers. They are hugely influential, massively influential politically, financially, religiously. They are an international banking corporation before those words really existed. They lent money to kings to fund wars. They had a standing army of thousands of heavily armed nutters. And I think that's enough. Like, the stuff that we already know about them, I think, is enough to make them a fascinating subject. Well worth studying. You might have some favourite Templar facts. You might have some stuff. Like, the stuff that we know about them, like the rule that we have their monastic rule written down in its original and expanded forms. That's such a wonderful, rare resource for a medieval organisation. That's fantastic. We know what they wore. We know what they weren't allowed to wear. That they weren't allowed to wear certain decorations. They weren't initially allowed to wear laced, pointed shoes. We know that they had to say their prayers all at the same time, communally. And if they couldn't sing the psalms together because they were in combat, or they were on the field, or they were out in the field doing something, they had to say prayers at the right times of day. We know that they were given certain numbers of horses and certain amounts of clothing, that they had sergeants and squires who worked for them basically on contract jobs, that they had contractors working for them. Like, not all the squires ended up being members of the Knights Templar. A lot of them just came, did some work, did the job, esquired for a bit, and then sodded off home. Like, we know so much about them. And the idea that, like, when they disbanded, all of their treasure mysteriously ended up somewhere. Yeah, it mysteriously ended up in Philip IV's coffers, the Knights Hospitallers' coffers, the coffers of the Order of Christ in Portugal, and just in the pockets of the men who escaped. Thousands of Templars were arrested and released. Thousands of them were pensioned off and lived peaceful lives. Because that's what happens when you wind up a big international organisation. People get paid off and leave. They didn't all get burned at the stake. They didn't all get executed. They weren't all just fleeing in the night wearing black cloaks and cradling chests full of jewels. And the Holy Grail stuff was made up during their existence. Like in the late 12th century, Parzival is written. And Parzival is basically a German version of Chrétien de Troyes' Holy Grail story. It's a poem, it's a lullaby, it's a fairy tale. It's a fictional story that was made up. There is no Holy Grail before Chrétien de Troyes. Like, he all but makes it up. And it's part of the, again, 12th century Renaissance. And this is the bit that involves King Arthur, who was ours. Arthur was ours. So, just enjoy it. Enjoy that. Just enjoy that in the 12th century, this organisation became so big and so influential that people were writing poetry about. This is kind of like people writing fiction about the SAS. This is like Commando comics, where a real thing that exists, the Royal Marines Commandos, have stories written about their legendary daring do, most of which are completely made-up comic books for kids. This is the Holy Grail saga. The Knights Templar involvement with them begins and ends with the epic poem Parzival. That's it. But it's another place where the wooey conspiracy stuff can leak in. And that is what we're going to look at in the next video. Part 2 of the Templar saga on this channel is going to be the conspiracies, it's going to be the mythos, it's going to be the legacy of them, and it's going to be where some of that comes from. And we're going to do some debunking, because I'm in a debunking mood now. I've done enough just straight history on this, and now I'm in the mood to debunk some nonsense. So, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring the video. And if you did enjoy it, please do like and subscribe, and give it the old algorithmic boost that a lot of channels are struggling with right now, because YouTube is trying to do too much and be too many websites at the same time. We like videos. And yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio. Thank you very much for watching. Tan y tro nesa. Until the next time, hwyl am y tro. Did a big old wave. That's how the Knights Templar used to wave goodbye. Goodbye. I'm a knight. Goodbye.
Big, manly, horny-helmeted Viking thanks to my patrons for making this video possible. Look at them all. You are all wonderful human beings. Masculine Viking thanks to you all. Yes. Yes. Delicious names.